Picture the moment before you existed. Somewhere, your mother is in pain, sweat on her skin, a rhythm building in her body that she cannot stop. In nearly every other mammal on Earth, this is a solitary event. A deer slips into the brush alone. A gorilla moves away from her troop. Even chimpanzees, 98.7% genetically identical to you, give birth in isolation, often at night, silently. So predators don't notice. But humans don't do that. For as long as we have records, and likely for tens of thousands of years before records existed, human mothers have almost never given birth alone. Not by accident, not by culture alone, by anatomical necessity. Here's the disruption. Your species may be the only primate on the planet whose body cannot reliably deliver a baby without help. That's not a metaphor. It's a mechanical fact, written into your pelvis and your skull. And once you understand why, you start to see childbirth not as a private medical event, but as the moment cooperation became a survival requirement for our species, the point where human society may have actually begun. Let's start with the trap your body is built inside. Around 2 million years ago, in what is now Ethiopia, an early hominin nicknamed Lucy Australopithecus afarensis was already walking upright. Bipedalism was efficient. It freed the hands. But it came at a cost. It narrowed the pelvis. A pelvis built for walking on 2 legs cannot be as wide as one built for a quadruped. Then, starting roughly 2 million years ago, the other half of the trap closed. Hominin brain size began tripling from around 400 cubic centimeters in early Australopithecus to nearly 1,350 cubic centimeters in Homo sapiens today. A narrower pelvis, a larger head, 2 evolutionary pressures moving in opposite directions, both non-negotiable. In 1960, anthropologist Sherwood Washburn gave this collision a name: the obstetrical dilemma. Your species solved it by being born. Early human infants arrive at a much less developed stage than other primates, effectively finishing gestation outside the womb. That's why a newborn foal can walk within an hour, and a newborn human can't lift its own head for months. But even with that compromise, human birth remained mechanically tight, dangerously tight. Compare that to Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania, where primatologist Jane Goodall spent decades observing wild chimpanzees. Chimp mothers give birth quickly, often in under 2 hours, and they do it alone. The mother can reach down, guide the infant out with her own hands, clear its airway, and lift it to her chest, all without assistance. Because the birth canal and the infant's proportions allow her body to face the same direction as the baby is emerging. Human anatomy does not allow that. But here's where it gets stranger. In most human births, the baby doesn't exit facing the mother. It rotates. Because of the twisting shape of the human pelvic canal, an infant typically descends facing sideways, then turns to face the mother's spine backward by the time it's born. That means a human mother giving birth alone cannot easily reach down and guide her own baby out the way a chimpanzee can. She can't see its face. If the umbilical cord is wrapped, if the baby is stuck at the shoulders, if it needs to be turned or cleared or lifted at the right angle, she is physically working against her own body's design. In 1987, anthropologists Wenda Trevathan and Karen Rosenberg formalized this into what's now called the birth attendance hypothesis. Their argument: unassisted childbirth in humans carries a measurably higher risk of injury to both mother and infant than assisted birth. Not a cultural preference, a structural one. And the fossil record backs it up in a brutal way. Consider a pelvis discovered in 2008 near a cave system in what is now Israel. Homo naledi remains found later, in 2013, in South Africa's Rising Star cave system. Along with earlier hominin pelvic fossils, show narrow birth canals stretching back over 200,000 years. Anthropologists estimate that before modern medicine, maternal mortality in childbirth may have been the single leading cause of death for women of reproductive age across most of human prehistory. Some estimates put childbirth-related death rates in pre-industrial populations as high as 1 in 100 births ending fatally for the mother, a rate that, repeated across a lifetime of multiple pregnancies, made birth one of the most dangerous recurring events a human being could survive. That's not the whole story, though, because if birth was this dangerous, and this mechanically difficult to do alone, evolution didn't just accept the risk. It appears to have selected for something else entirely, an instinct to seek company. In 2011, evolutionary anthropologist Trevathan expanded her research using data from small-scale societies studied throughout the 20th century, including the Efe people of the Ituri Forest in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Kung of the Kalahari Desert in Botswana and Namibia. Across radically different climates, diets, and belief systems, one pattern kept repeating: women in labor sought out other women. Mothers, sisters, elder attendants, what anthropologists now call doulas, existed, functionally, long before the word did. Even more telling in nearly every one of these societies, a laboring woman giving birth completely alone wasn't seen as brave. It was seen as a crisis. But here's where it gets stranger still. If assisted birth was simply about physical help, extra hands, extra strength, you'd expect it to fade the moment danger passed. It didn't. It became ritual. At Adelhike, a 9,000-year-old settlement in what is now central Turkey, archaeologists excavating in the 1960s and again in the 1990s found birthing scenes carved and painted directly into the walls of homes, women flanked by attendants, in group formation, memorialized in plaster. This wasn't a private act tucked into the margins of daily life. It was public enough, important enough, to be permanently recorded in the architecture people lived inside. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy pushed the explanation further in her 2009 book on cooperative breeding, arguing that humans are what biologists call cooperative breeders, a small category of species, including elephants and some birds, where individuals other than the biological mother routinely help raise and protect offspring. Hrdy's argument is that this cooperation didn't start after birth. It started at birth. The infant's survival and the mother's depended from the very first minute on a network of other people showing up. That reframes something fundamental. The assumption going in was that human intelligence built human society, that big brains led to cooperation. But the obstetrical dilemma suggests something closer to the reverse. The very thing that made human brains possible, a wider, more dangerous, more complicated birth, may have forced cooperation into existence first, as the price of admission for having those bigger brains at all. Except there was a problem with keeping this system intact. As human societies scaled up, as small kin-based bands became villages, then cities, then the anonymous urban world most of you live in now, something happened that hadn't happened in the preceding 200,000 years. Birth started moving away from the group. By the 18th and 19th centuries, in industrializing Europe and North America, birth increasingly meant one mother, one doctor, sterile instruments, a closed room. Efficient, sanitary, and, for the first time in the history of the species, often nearly solitary again, not because the mother's anatomy had changed, but because the social structure around her had. Which brings it back to you. If you were born in a hospital, there's a good chance your mother was surrounded by strangers in scrubs rather than by the web of mothers, sisters, and elders that attended nearly every birth for 250,000 years before her. The room changed. The uniforms changed. But the underlying biology didn't. Your skull is still too big. Her pelvis was still too narrow. The dilemma that shaped the entire architecture of human cooperation was still sitting there in the room with you, whether anyone in it understood it or not. You didn't just enter the world needing help. Your species was built, skeleton and brain, around the fact that you would.